All right, team. As I was looking at the Democrat response to things, I also came across that the president retweeted one of my thoughts on one of my tweets on the Iraq situation. So always appreciate that from POTUS. And it has to do with my point on the invulnerability, the invincibility of Qasem Soleimani. This is absurd. Why would we give somebody that designation, which is effectively what he had, which is why he was taking selfies, why he thought that he could run around the battlefield. And then you have all these journalists and liberals and Democrats, really all one and the same, who are running around just screaming about this because they're so certain that this will lead to war. War is not what Trump wants. War would be, a real war with Iran, where we were, there was a declaration of open hostilities, and the only way this thing ends is if the Iranian government sues for peace or if we take out the Iranian regime, right? That's not what Trump wants, and that's not what's going to happen here, by the way. The people that are claiming that this is going to just lead us inevitably into an all-out conflict, I think they just don't know what they're talking about. It's not the case. But that's a very helpful talking point for those who just want to find a means to do everything they can to undermine the Trump administration, right? Trump is a warmonger now. This is what they say. Meanwhile, you look at a list, I was mentioning this before, of difficult foreign policy decisions that he's made, or when I say difficult, I should say decisions that come with a risk factor, but a willingness to make those decisions. You know, the Obama administration got such a pass from the press because it was always, they're being deliberative. No, they just were being indecisive because they didn't want to make a tough call, because you make a tough call, it goes wrong, you get held responsible. They didn't want to get held responsible, so they didn't want to do that. This is where you got things like leading from behind in Syria, or strategic patience was another thing with the Obama administration. You know, it's just, you can't make this stuff up. And it was all to get the JCPOA, by the way. The invulnerability that was conferred on specifically Qasem Soleimani was directly tied to the fact that the Obama administration absolutely needed some kind of deal with the Iranians in order to cement a foreign policy legacy, which would then transition into a glorious Hillary Clinton administration, and so on and so forth. That was the plan. And now, not only has Trump said, no, we're out of this bad deal, but also people are looking at what the reality was of Iran post-JCPOA and saying to themselves, hold on a second. They still get to do all the terrorist stuff? They still get to go after our people and undermine our interests across the region? No. Enough is enough. And this is something that, if you walk around, you ask just an everyday American, hey, this guy killed a lot of soldiers. Should we take him out? We know he killed a lot of American soldiers. Most Americans would say, yeah, protect our people. Absolutely. And yet the foreign policy intelligentsia, such as it is, thinks that this is a horrible decision by Trump, and that this is, Qasem Soleimani is a big deal. Don't get me wrong. To the Iranians, is a big deal. It's not a small figure, but then again, we went to war with the Taliban, and they were calling Osama bin Laden, Sheikh, and he was very much calling the shots with the Taliban for a while. You had Omar, obviously, is technically the head of the Taliban, but I think he was doing bin Laden's bidding. So this is a moment where we should be braced for some kind of impact. I'm not saying nothing will happen. But the Democrats are saying that we're about to go to war, and the war that we're going to face is all Trump's fault. You had Chris Murphy from Connecticut, senator, I think. I don't think he's a congressman. I think he's a senator, whatever. Soleimani, I know I should know all these things, but sometimes. Also, you can hear my cold now has transitioned to a point where it sounds more like a cold than it did before, but I actually feel better, for whatever that's worth. Yesterday, I felt a lot worse. Soleimani was an enemy of the United States. That's not a question, Chris Murphy writes. The question is, as reports suggest, did America just assassinate, without any congressional authorization, the second most powerful person in Iran, knowingly setting off a potential massive regional war? This is just going 10 steps beyond where we currently are, because anything that Trump does must be greeted with hysteria and, oh my gosh, we're all going to die. Everything Trump does. This is the environment the Democrats have created now. We know that There are others who are saying even crazier things. I mean, I don't even know if it's worth spending any time on it, but Rose McGowan, the actress, I don't have the tweet in front of me, but essentially he's put out something like, don't blame us, Iran. We're being held captive by a terrorist regime, meaning here in America, and please don't kill us all, and we're sorry. And I mean, this is a little bit of the mentality of the left. I mean, that's obviously a somewhat exaggerated version of it, but this is the approach that they tend to take. They really seem to think that if we get down on our hands and knees and beg forgiveness from the Iranian regime, all the bad things we've done. Iran never has to apologize for anything. All the bad things that we've done, though, will somehow be forgiven, and we can just move on. One thing that is likely to happen here, I mean, again, I've told you, no one knows. If I knew where the Iranians were going to strike, I wouldn't say it on this radio show. I would call some of my friends at Langley and the White House. I mean, I don't know. And I don't even have a good idea. The Strait of Hormuz is the obvious, just from this perspective of creating a massive economic and national security catastrophe. I mean, that's the first place they'd go, but there might be other options that the Iranians decide to pursue here. But as I said, this isn't a band of terrorists not affiliated with any state where, okay, how do you, other than just tracking them all down as individuals, how do you exact any punishment against them? I mean, if the Iranians shut down the Straits of Hormuz, I mean, I think we're probably just going to take out every Iranian military airfield, every Iranian military base. We destroy all their military infrastructure. Not going after civilians, not going after their population centers. We're not doing that. That's not how America operates. But we take out all their military facilities, or half of them, or whatever the decision that it's made in the E-ring of the Pentagon, Joint Chiefs of Staff, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we could do. And there's very little the Iranians could do about it. And at some point, how much pain do they really want to bring upon themselves? And this is the nature. I mean, ultimately, this is when we discuss how Trump has a gut instinct of how to deal with bullies and thugs and bad people. And all the so-called smart set, the very overrated intellectuals of the foreign policy world, who really just like to sit around and spew a lot of their degrees and their knowledge at each other without ever being held accountable for terrible decision-making and no real progress. And the ossified nature of policy debate that you'll come across from people in the State Department and people in the intelligence community. I was in CIA, I remember. A lot of folks just want to whap, 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 just talk about this stuff all day long, do nothing about it. And then if anyone actually takes decisive action, they flip out and lose their minds. Oh, and one other point here. The tribalism of the Democrats can't be overstated either. It is a real thing, and I remember it. I was working in conservative media at the time when Obama gave the order, and he did give the order as commander-in-chief for the raid on Osama bin Laden. Republicans were all saying, maybe it was a little bit begrudgingly for some of them, but they were all saying, good job, Obama. That was the right move. That was almost, I mean, I can think of very few, if any, exceptions off the top of my head to that. I was certainly the camp where I said, look, give credit where it's due. Be a principled person in the way you assess the actions of those who are in power. And it was the right move, okay? And it wasn't quite as hard. It's hard for the Navy SEALs that were all risking their lives, getting on choppers, going into Pakistan, could spend the rest of their lives in prison or worse. Hard for them. Really that hard for Obama? I mean, cross-border raids are not actually as unusual as people think they are from Afghanistan into Pakistan. And, they could have just said, we tried. And yeah, maybe it would have been a Jimmy Carter moment for Obama, but instead it helped get him reelected. But it was the right move. The point is, Republicans were willing to say this was the right move. And you remember when Trump gave the order to obviously send our special operators after Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. There were people then who were, but because of what he did before, we wouldn't have, they were complaining. They immediately found a way to complain about it. They couldn't just say, yeah, good move. Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. We're all Americans first. And now you have another instance where most of the powerful Democrats, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all these others, immediately turn around and use this as a means of criticizing Trump. Do you think that President Bernie Sanders would have given this order? Really let that one marinate for a second. Let that one simmer. You think that President Elizabeth Warren would have given this order? Obama didn't. Bush didn't. As I said, Bush was, You got to remember, Bush the first 4 years was different than Bush the second 4 years. Second 4 year Bush, and I briefed him a couple times in the Oval Office on intelligence matters for the CIA. I remember he was a beaten down fellow, beaten down from both wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, the global war on terror, post 9/11. I mean, he was a shadow of his former self, and didn't have. It's also, don't even get me started. He wouldn't pardon Scooter Libby. I mean, he just lost his gut. He lost his grit, his instinct to do what was necessary in a lot of ways and a lot of things. Just barely willing to go forward with the surge, by the way. I mean, the surge was a much dicier proposition in terms of getting the go-ahead than people realize. But maybe stories for another time. I remember because I was there. Democrats are using this first and foremost as an opportunity to try and undermine the President of the United States. That's the single most important thing to them. Not what does this mean for us? Are we going to war or not? The tribalism of Democrats knows no bounds. I mean, Trump is evil is that's the first thought they have. It's the last thought they have. It's all that really motivates them, it feels like, in a day-to-day sense now. Those in the political scene on the left, opposition to Trump is everything. Now, what are we going to see? Next step, I was going to say this before, and I got sidetracked because I have a lot to tell you on all this stuff. You will see the Iraqi parliament probably vote to eliminate the U.S. presence in Iraq. This will be interesting. Okay. Are we going to withdraw U.S. military in response to the Iraqi parliament saying we got to go? Does this actually turn into a way that Trump ends the formal U.S. military presence in Iraq? Now, we remember what happened after Obama did that. Obama just pulled up and said, we're all coming out. They pretended they couldn't get a status of forces agreement, but they didn't want a status of forces agreement. They let the negotiations fail, and then they pulled out U.S. troops. And then we had the rise of ISIS. Maybe this time around, Trump will find a way to deal with them so that so the Iraqi government doesn't tell us that we have to be ejected. But, maybe it's time to build a base up in Kurdistan, folks. I mean, it's time for some outside-the-box thinking. What we've been doing is not working. What we have been doing in the Middle East has not had the benefits for us that we would have thought, given the amount of blood and treasure and toil that we have put into this situation. So I do think you're going to have this vote in the Iraqi parliament, and that could say the U.S. presence in Iraq is then on a very, very shaky ground. But we don't want to be in Iraq forever. And, ultimately, we do have to accept that some of these countries are going to figure out their stuff on their own. It's not going to be us. That's really the red line for me. We're not rebuilding other people. We're not rebuilding any more Muslim countries. That's done. We've had enough of that. We're not doing regime change. We're not rebuilding. But that doesn't mean that if they take a bunch of U.S. soldiers prisoner, or if they shoot down one of our ships or a plane, we don't annihilate all their military facilities. That's not the same thing as saying, well, we're going to invade your country, take over, and police your streets, build your schools, write your constitution for you. It's not the same thing. You need to separate these things when we're talking about the range of options here. But you are probably going to have this Iraqi vote in the parliament. I mean, you can go back. I don't remember the show now, but I said the Iraqis are going to kick us out. So this has been coming, by the way. They've been meaning to kick us out for a while. You got a Shia majority country. Iran is really their biggest, I was going to say supporter. That's not even really, they're the most influential external actor in Iraqi politics is Iran. And that's not going to change. You do have a Shia majority in the country, and you're going to have sectarianism continuing on here. And Iraq is going to be a messy, nasty place for a long time. Not going to be our messy, nasty place, hopefully. That's the real separation. That's the real point. Trump doesn't want war in Iraq. I know that. I mean, war with Iran. He doesn't want a war in Iran. He understands that would be a threat to his reelection. I think a lot more importantly for Trump, he realizes, are we ever going to learn the lesson? Are we ever going to learn the lesson? And it is a little scary that you got Bolton running around saying, I hope this is the first step to regime change. I saw that tweet that I said, wow, this guy, he's just a true believer. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many trillions of dollars we spend, how many soldiers, thousands of soldiers die, tens of thousands of soldiers grievously wounded, people coming back with PTSD. For what? I would like a better answer. And in Afghanistan, at least we did eliminate the Taliban eliminate Al-Qaeda and kick the Taliban out of power. Mission accomplished in that sense. Okay. What exactly are we doing in Iraq? A lot much tougher discussion to be had. So that's what I've got for you today on what's going to happen with Qasem Soleimani. I don't want to spend the whole show on this. We got other things to talk about, but this is a big one, and things could get a little scary in the days ahead. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, stuff could happen here. This is, you've got a cornered, vicious enemy that feels like they have to do something. I just hope that they recognize that this commander-in-chief is not the previous one or the one before that. They do not want to test him. I do not want to see what will be the aftermath, or maybe, depending on what the Iranians do, maybe I do want to see the aftermath, but it's going to be a fearsome thing. I mean, we will remember the day that Trump orders retaliation against the Iranians if the Iranians really decide that they want to pick a fight here, a real fight.
Soleimani it's difficult to convey how revered he is in Iran. Imagine the French Foreign Legion at the height of the French Empire. This guy is regarded in Iran as a completely heroic figure, personally very brave.
I was wondering, earlier when Ara was talking, I was trying to think of somebody, and I was thinking of de Gaulle, although he became a leader of the country, which
right,
is not.
It's not quite, but yeah, but there's something, he's bigger than any, put it this way, other than the supreme leader, Khamenei, and maybe the president, he looms larger in Iran than almost any other figure. He's regarded as personally incredibly brave. The troops love him. And he has been the kind of mastermind of Iran's policies in Syria, in Iraq.
Oh, why do we need to have any Iranian state TV propaganda? Just put CNN on the air. Anderson Cooper's like, yeah, kind of like Charles de Gaulle. Fareed Zakaria is like, yeah, this guy is really beloved. This is amazing. The Washington Post, right after this happened, this was the headline: airstrike at Baghdad airport kills Iran's most revered military leader, Qasem Soleimani. Most revered military leader, my friends. That now joins austere religious scholar and mourners trying to storm our embassy as word choices that make normal people wonder whose side the American mainstream media is on. Mourners that are storming our embassy. Austere religious scholar for Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the terrorist. Qasem Soleimani, terrorist mastermind. He's the most revered military leader in Iran. This is how they describe it. Now, even if that's true, I would just note, okay, Osama bin Laden was the most revered al-Qaeda leader. Did they refer to him? Was he always referred to as the most revered charismatic leader of al-Qaeda? Osama bin Laden. Was that his official title at the Washington Post and at CNN? I just want to know. It's tough. I don't know what's worse, that these people are idiots or that they just don't really like America all that much. At least not America with Trump running it. I don't know. You can go in either direction. You can convince me either one is true.
You look at a city like mine with de Blasio. Since he's been mayor, Democratic mayor, socialist mayor, poor people have done much worse than when I was mayor and Bloomberg was mayor. You're a big phony act. Look at Democratic cities. Poor people are suffering for 20, 30, 40 years. And the Democrats have done nothing but steal. It's time for a big change. The Democratic Party has to go through a revision. They have to get back to one of the reasons I was a Democrat a long time ago, to take care of people. They're taking care of themselves now, not people.
New York City is in a bit of a decline right now. Maybe not. Well, real estate actually is down here, but I mean in terms of crime, in terms of safety on the streets. And we've had this whole slew of really vicious, brutal anti-Semitic attacks. And people are starting to ask the question, okay, what exactly has changed here? Why are things getting worse? In a time of low unemployment, a time of general prosperity, rising wages, why do we have dirtier, less safe streets than we did in the past? There's more trash in the ground. There's a much bigger problem of vagrancy here. We have the biggest, people talk about California, but actually in sheer numbers, New York, of course, has a larger population. I think New York has the largest homeless population in the entire country for any city. And it's getting worse. It's getting worse. And it's getting worse in part because this is a problem we find with Democrats, with leftists, really. And I think we need to start transitioning and making it very clear they're not liberals. The Democratic Party of today is a leftist party. People like Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they are where the party is going. So they can try to head fake us with Joe Biden, who's just an idiot who'll say whatever he has to get elected anytime he's trying to get elected. But the real movement within the Democratic Party is to the left, and it is socialist. I mean, they are socialists now. They will quibble with that because we understand that our country is different from other countries and that we believe in individual rights, property rights, that the individual is separate and sacred and not part of just the collective, and that the common good, as defined by an elite or by bureaucrats or a combination thereof, does not override the individual rights and freedoms that any one of us should have, that we are a country of individuals first and foremost, and also a country of individuals and then family, right? You can see the tension between the collectivist, socialist approach to society that the Democrats are constantly advocating for and what conservatives, at least those who understand the ideology, which unfortunately these days doesn't even include a lot of people who are very prominent on the right, but we could talk about that some other time if you want. Oh, yeah, no, there's a whole movement of grifters. They're doing a great job pretending to care about things they could care less about. But the truth is, this tension is getting stronger right now. And the collective versus the individual is the fight of the 2020 election, although we'll see what happens with Iran. I don't think we're going to war there. If that happens, there'll be other stuff to talk about. But they never learn the lessons of the past. That's why I was getting on a little rant here about socialists. They never look at what has happened, what works and what doesn't work, and say, we will learn lessons from this. You know, what's the old line about conservatives stand athwart history yelling stop? I forget who that quote is attributed to, but I want to say it was Buckley. That's not right. I don't know who it is. Whatever. It's a good quote, though. I throw good quotes into the show. Conservatives also stand athwart libs and commies and socialists and say, hey, look at what happened before. Let's learn from this. Let's learn from the mistakes of the past. Let's understand. I mean, that's one of the great ironies of the progressive movement in so many ways, is that they want to progress by doing things that they have either already tried and failed or that other people have done and failed miserably at and led to deprivation, despair, and tyranny. I mean, this is the way it goes, right? There are cycles of this. And Bill de Blasio, who is a far left guy and takes this criminal justice reform approach here in New York City, this is where you have to start really digging down into what does criminal justice reform mean? Yeah, I mean, even producer Mark was, Bill de Blasio is an idiot. We all know this. And criminal justice reform, as far as de Blasio is concerned, just means doing whatever he has to do to make certain constituencies think that he's on their side more, whatever that means. Not the cops, not on the cop side. But for example, I mean, part of criminal justice reform movements now in this country, and this is where some conservatives have come along. I believe in some criminal justice reform. I mean, I do think that first-time, truly nonviolent drug offenders, and this is where you get into, did the person take a plea to a nonviolent felony when they could have been, for example, charged for extortion, weapons possession, other things that aren't, this is not somebody that you want in your neighborhood, right? We're always led to believe that it's somebody who just got caught with a little too much weed and they're spending 30 years in prison. That's not what happens. I mean, it can happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but that's generally not the case. But there's also this more insidious narrative out there that the criminal justice system is racist because of the racial disparity of inmates within the criminal justice system. Here's the problem with that. Most of the people who are in prison, and I say most, I mean, overwhelming majority, I can't give you a number, but people are in prison usually because they committed a crime. They did something that is in violation of U.S. law or state law, right? They did something that is illegal. It's not because of their skin color. It's because they did something that is a crime. But this narrative on the left has been able to grow where, the criminal justice system is racist. Not that it has some racist shortcomings. There's some cases here or there, because clearly that's true. It's kind of like saying, okay, well, are there racist cops? Yes. Is law enforcement racist in this country? They would say yes too, but the answer is no. Law enforcement in this country is not racist. It's not accurate. The stats don't bear it out, and anybody who spent any time as I have working with law enforcement knows it's just not the case. But these narratives have grown so that you now have this rubric of criminal justice reform in a place like New York City, a place like Los Angeles, where now you can't. I think if you commit a property crime under $900, it's a misdemeanor now in Los Angeles. We are returning to some of the theories about criminal justice and social justice from the 70s and the 80s in places like New York, Los Angeles, and elsewhere. Baltimore's murder rate is sky high right now per capita. I went to Baltimore. It's stunning. I went to the poorest areas of Baltimore specifically to spend time in them and see what was going on. And you feel like you're in a time warp to some city in the midst of the 80s crack epidemic. This is today. You can go right now and check it out for yourself. And in the midst of this, and remember, there's a momentum to these things. It doesn't change overnight. And by the time it is irrefutable that you have had a major increase in the criminality in a city, it is much more difficult to deal with. But if you wait until everyone has to agree, yeah, wow, there's way too much criminality here, then that's too late. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that. In fact, even Bill de Blasio has gotten closer to this. Here's what he has said. Closer to the reality here. Here's what he said about the very foolish bail reform law in New York City. Play 12.
But where I think there's real agreement is that the bail reform law needs to be amended. I believe this strongly. I know Commissioner Shea and Chief Monahan believe it. There is a chance now for the legislature to get it right. They did some very good reforms, but there's also things that need to be done, particularly empowering judges to determine if someone poses a threat to the surrounding community and giving judges the power to act on that.
Because guess what? Right now, there are a whole bunch of very serious crimes for which the judge is not allowed to post any bail and not allowed to hold somebody in custody until their trial. Have to be released. No bail, released, out on the street. Different kinds of, some kinds of arson, some kinds of burglary. I believe even, I think sexual assault or rape 3 might be one. I mean, there's third degree, first degree is the worst. It can vary depending on, the jurisdiction, whether first degree or third degree. Right? Third degree burn is the worst burn, but first degree murder is the worst murder. The reality here is that people, including some who were involved in, or one woman who was involved in these anti-Semitic attacks, if a judge had been able to remand them to custody until their trial, perhaps there'd be people who weren't attacked. These are real public safety threats. But, the narrative is the system is unfair, the system penalizes minorities, the system is racist. And therefore, we just have to stop the system from functioning as it does. I know, for example, that there's one of the problems that the district attorney's office here has in New York now is that there's so much paperwork and discovery required to bring a criminal case in the city of New York that the lawyers involved in it will say that they just, the prosecutors, the district attorney's office employees will tell you, they're overwhelmed. And this is but the legislature, the state legislature wants these things because that then makes it harder to push prosecutions, which gives leverage to people who want to seek deals so that they spend less time in prison or get no prison time at all. Right? They're just slowing down the machinery of criminal prosecution. I mean, I saw Tucker's show last night. Tucker, whenever I do a show, we usually, especially if we can talk about the reality of the criminal prosecution system in this country, you can't help but look and say, hold on a second. So Paul Manafort is facing like 40 years in prison, but there are people that shoot people. I mean, literally shoot people in Philadelphia. And the district attorney there is like, well, we got to go easy on them. And there are murderers that they're saying, well, he wrote like nice poems when he was in prison, or he's got some like left-wing group that says that this is unfair or racist or something, so we should let this. It's just crazy. It's gotten completely off the rails. I mean, I forget the name of the guy, but the prosecutor in Philadelphia is just horrifying, and the situation here in New York is not all that much better. And people can point to this, say, oh, we have low murder rates. It's not true in places like Baltimore. I'm not sure what the Philly murder rate is. I think it's been pretty bad, but not that bad. Well, yeah, we have low murder rates, but quality of life crimes, property crimes, these things, they grow in time, and if not addressed, it just leads to greater criminality and problems of violence, and eventually you get to murders and homicides. What do you think, producer Mark?
Philly has the most murders since 2007 last year.
Wait,
356
in its wow.
Yeah, 356 homicides last year, most since 07 in Philadelphia.
Would you to find out the name of the prosecutor for me? By the way, the district attorney is the one I'm looking for in Philadelphia.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Philly's even worse than I thought. I knew it was bad. I didn't know how bad it was. I mean, Baltimore is in terrible shape. Obviously, the south side of Chicago. I think the west side of Chicago has a fair amount of violence too. That's really in bad shape. And this is all because of these narratives that Democrats say, because it makes them feel good. It makes them feel like they're being the nice people. They don't want to be racists. What is it?
Larry Krasner?
Yes. Yeah. That guy is he's just like, let him out. Let him out. We don't want bad people going to prison. I've always been somebody who's, I was saying before, whenever I talk about this, we always agree. Yeah, what exactly are we sending? Never mind Paul Manafort. Yeah, okay, the guy didn't, he cheated on his taxes. I think if you cheat on your taxes, by the way, for the most part, you should end up just having to pay everything you owe and then a big fine. And it better be really cheating, not like the government saying you're cheating, but it's a close call, right? It better be like you just don't declare a whole bunch of money you make. Don't even get me started about, do we have to have a federal income tax? It's a conversation for another day. I think the answer, unfortunately, is politically driven, and it's yes, but I wish it wasn't the case. But Roger Stone. Roger Stone is, Tucker brought this up last night on his show. Roger Stone is facing prison time. For what? We sent this guy to prison? For years. Years and years of federal prison. For what? Oh, who's not going to get prison for lying is Andy McCabe, as I've been telling you all along. He's not going to go to prison. Story just came out yesterday that former acting FBI director McCabe told FBI agents, basically told them at one point when he got caught lying about a leak that they were investigating. So they're investigating a leak. He lied to them. He actually was the one who did the leak. So he was trying. This was a material lie. This is not a minor lie. This isn't, I had cornflakes yesterday. Oh, no, it was Fruit Loops. Which, by the way, would be a decent trade-off because Fruit Loops are way better than cornflakes, as everybody knows. I mean, if you're going to have cereal with breakfast, which is terrible for you anyway, go for, like, the cereal that you wanted when you were a kid. You don't even need milk. It's so delicious. By the way, do you see Gene Simmons freak everybody out on social media because he posted that he puts ice cubes in his cereal and milk?
Yeah, I thought he died because I saw he was trending.
Yeah, no.
He did not die. He was getting death threats probably from that.
Just civilized milk and cereal in the morning perhaps died.
Yeah.
Because you can now only.
Is it because he wants the cold milk? Is that it?
So. Got to keep that milk frosty.
I've never been a milk and cereal guy. I'm not a big cereal guy in general.
Yeah. Look, cereal is terrible for you. I mean, let me just be the way. That's like you're just eating sugar. You're just eating sugar. It's all.
I like Life cereal. That's not that bad for you.
Yeah. I mean, then people would say Cheerios. Cheerios, I think, makes a gluten-free version, which is actually
I think so, and they're supposed to be heart healthy.
Heart healthy is also very much a kind of whatever.
Yeah. They just put that on the label to make you buy it.
Yeah, make you feel better while you're sitting there shoveling carbs and sugar in your mouth. Anyway, sugar for breakfast, not the way to go, folks. Actually, if you want to go of high fat for breakfast is actually the move. Do as I say, not as I do, though. Because I know what the right things are to do. I know what the right things are to work out, to eat. I just don't do them. I eat brie and take naps. Anyway, the city is getting... Did I just admit to eating brie? Yeah, I like brie. What can I tell you? I like fatty cheese, goat cheese, brie, all the soft camembert. The more frou-frou it sounds and the higher the fat content and the stinkier the cheese, the more I like it. Anyway, they're ruining New York City with this stuff, and this is all part of a national narrative that the criminal when we think of criminal justice reform, it's let's be fair to people and like give them a second chance. When they think of criminal justice reform on the left, it's let's tear down the system. It's racist. It's not fair. Let a lot of people out. Let's even the score by letting criminals out of prison. What does that even mean? Well, de Blasio is trying to find out.
Would you testify in the trial?
I would testify. I would do demonstrations. I'd give lectures. I'd give summations. Or I'd do what I do best. I'd try the case. I'd love to try the case.
Would you do it? Are you going to? Or are you telling us you would try the case?
I don't know if anybody would have the courage to give me the case. But if you give me the case, I will prosecute it as a racketeering case, which I kind of invented anyway. So it's been 30 years ago, but let's see if I can still do it.
I hope Rudy testifies if there's a Senate trial. That'd be fun. Speaking of somebody who cleaned up New York City, by the way, I'm forever grateful to America's mayor. You guys know I like Giuliani, so It can be done. Oh, by the way, producer Nick just told me that it was Buckley in the NRO mission statement said standing athwart history yelling stop. That's what a conservative. So even when I think I'm wrong, I'm right. It's a classic Buckism there, but that's the way it goes. That's the way it is. So we have much to get to, my friends, much to discuss coming up in the next piece of the show here, including, I didn't get this before, some of my viewing over the Christmas break, which I want to share with you. The Witcher and The Mandalorian, A Tale of Two Shows. I will get into that and more